The Great Hall of Concordia Prime buzzed with quiet conversations. Hundreds of different alien species filled the massive space station. Some walked on two legs like humans once did. Others floated in special tanks filled with glowing liquid. A few moved on dozens of tiny legs that clicked against the metal floor. Today was the day they remembered the lost species. Every year, the Galactic Council held this ceremony. They spoke about civilizations that had vanished from space. Some died in wars. Others fell to disease or natural disasters. A few simply disappeared without any trace at all. Ambassador Ra stepped up to the speaking platform. Her blue skin shimmered under the lights. She was from the Federation, one of the oldest members of the Council. 4 arms moved gracefully as she began to speak. "We gather today to honor those who came before us," she said. Her voice carried clearly through the hall. "We remember their achievements, we learn from their mistakes, and we promise never to forget their stories." The crowd grew quiet. This was the most important part of the ceremony. 15 years ago, we lost the humans, Ra continued. They were young as species go, only 300 years since they invented faster-than-light travel. They had just started building colonies on other worlds. She paused and looked around the hall. Many of the aliens present had never met a human. They only knew them from old records and videos. The humans had 3 colony worlds. New Geneva was known for its beautiful floating cities. Hope grew the best food in that sector of space. Terra Nova was becoming a center for research and learning. Dr. Zephyr sat in the observation deck high above the main hall. She was the only human left in the galaxy. At 127 years old, she looked much younger thanks to advanced medicine, but her eyes held deep sadness that no treatment could cure. She had been working on an archaeological dig when it happened. The void storm struck without warning. When she tried to contact Earth, there was only silence. When she rushed back to human space, she found empty worlds. The cities were intact. The ships sat in their docks. Food was still warm on tables in some places, but every single human was gone. 12 billion people had simply vanished. The search teams found no signs of violence, Ra was saying. No evidence of evacuation. No messages or recordings to explain what happened. It was as if 12 billion humans just decided to disappear at the exact same moment. Zephyr closed her eyes. She had led many of those search teams. For months, they had scanned every inch of human space. They checked every planet, every asteroid, every ship. Nothing. Her entire species had vanished like morning mist. The Galactic Council had been kind to her. They gave her a job studying ancient civilizations. They provided her with a ship and a research team, but she could see the pity in their eyes. She was the last of her kind, a living museum piece. Some believed the humans tried to expand too fast, Ra continued. Others thought they encountered something beyond their understanding. We may never know the truth. After the human disappearance, war had broken out between the major powers. The Hegemony War lasted 3 years and killed billions. Resources that could have been used to search for humans were spent on weapons instead. By the time peace returned, most people had forgotten about the missing species. Zephyr spent her days digging through ruins of dead civilizations. She looked for clues about what might have happened to her people. She studied extinction events and mysterious disappearances, but every lead went nowhere. At night, she dreamed of Earth. She remembered the smell of rain on summer days. She could still hear her mother's laugh and her father's terrible jokes. Sometimes she woke up expecting to see blue skies and white clouds. Instead, she saw the cold stars through her ship's window. The ceremony was ending. Representatives from hundreds of species stood for a moment of silence. They thought about all the civilizations that had come and gone. Most of them felt grateful that their own people had survived. Ra spoke the traditional closing words. "We are the living memory of the dead. We carry their stories forward into the future. We promise that they will not be forgotten." Zephyr wiped tears from her eyes. 15 years, and it still hurt like it happened yesterday. She was getting old, even with life extension treatments. When she died, there would be no one left to remember what humans were really like. Down in the control room, senior scanner technician Al was having a very boring day. Traffic around Concordia Prime was normal. A few trade ships coming and going. Some diplomatic vessels carrying ambassadors. Nothing interesting. She had 4 eyes, which was normal for her species. Right now, all 4 were focused on different screens. The memorial ceremony would end soon, and then everyone would want to leave at the same time. That always made traffic control complicated. A soft beep caught her attention. Long-range sensors were picking up something at the edge of the system, probably just another late arrival for the ceremony. She switched to the deep space scanner and looked at the readings. What she saw made no sense. The computer was showing warp signatures, lots of them, but these patterns were in the historical database marked as extinct. She had seen these exact energy readings before, in old files about human ships. Al rubbed all 4 eyes and looked again. The signatures were getting stronger. Something big was coming out of warp space. Something that should not exist. Her hands shook as she reached for the emergency communication button. Whatever was coming would change everything. Al stared at her scanner screens. Her 4 eyes couldn't believe what they were showing her. The warp signatures were definitely human, but that was impossible. Humans were extinct. She had just listened to their memorial service. She ran the scan again. The computer confirmed what she was seeing. Multiple ships were dropping out of warp space at the edge of the system. The energy patterns matched archived human vessel data perfectly. But these weren't the small ships humans used to fly. These signatures were massive. The largest one was bigger than anything in the Council's fleet, and there were dozens of them. "Alert condition yellow," she announced over the station's communication system. Her voice shook slightly. "Unknown fleet approaching. All departments prepare for possible contact." Admiral Sarah stood on the bridge of her flagship, watching the space station grow larger on the main screen. 15 years had passed since any human had seen Concordia Prime. It looked exactly the same as she remembered from old recordings. "Ma'am, we're being scanned by everyone in the system," her communications officer reported. "I'm counting over 3,000 separate signals trying to contact us." Nodded, she had expected this reaction. The return of humanity would shock the galaxy, but they had no choice. Time was running out. "Open a channel to the station," she ordered. "Let them know we're here in peace." The bridge around her looked similar to old human ships, but with important differences. The walls seemed to shimmer with embedded technology that hadn't existed before the disappearance. Control panels responded to thought as much as touch. The crew moved with enhanced reflexes that came from genetic improvements made during their long exile. Herself looked mostly human, but her eyes held depths that spoke of experiences beyond normal understanding. Her uniform seemed to shift and flow like liquid metal. She had seen things in the deep dark that had changed her in ways that were hard to explain. Down in the council chamber, emergency alarms were sounding. The memorial service had ended abruptly when news of the approaching fleet reached the delegates. Now hundreds of alien representatives were demanding answers that no one had. Dr. Zephyr ran through the corridors of Concordia Prime faster than she had moved in years. Her heart pounded with hope and fear. Could it really be true? Were her people coming home? She reached the observation deck and pressed against the transparent wall. In the distance, she could see lights that hadn't been there before. Ships that looked familiar but wrong at the same time. The basic shapes were human, but they seemed more advanced than anything humans had ever built. "Is it really them?" someone asked behind her. Zephyr turned to see Ra standing in the doorway. The ambassador looked as shocked as everyone else. "I think so," Zephyr whispered. Those are human ship configurations, but they're different, bigger, more advanced. The emergency council session began within hours. Representatives who had been enemies for decades sat next to each other without argument. Everyone wanted to understand what was happening. The main screen showed a tactical display of the human fleet, 127 ships in perfect formation. They had stopped just outside the system's defense perimeter and were waiting patiently for permission to approach. "They're not responding to standard communication protocols," the station commander reported. "But they're not making any threatening moves either. They're just waiting." Doctor was given a place at the main table despite not being an official representative. As the only human in the galaxy, her input was considered essential. "Can you explain this?" Ra asked her. "Are these really your people?" "I don't know," Zephyr admitted. "The ships look human, but I've never seen designs like these. And if humans survived somewhere, why didn't they contact me? Why wait 15 years to return?" The answer came when Admiral finally accepted the Council's invitation for direct communication. Her image appeared on the main screen as a holographic projection. The chamber fell completely silent. She looked human but different. Her features were familiar, but her presence seemed larger than it should be. When she spoke, her voice carried clearly through the vast chamber without any electronic amplification. "Honored delegates," she began, "I am Admiral Sarah of the Terran Expeditionary Fleet. We have returned home." Doctor gasped and covered her mouth with both hands. Tears began flowing down her face. After 15 years of being alone, she was looking at another human being. "Where have you been?" Ra asked. "What happened to your people?" His expression became serious. "We have been in the deep dark, the space between galaxies. We did not leave by choice. We left because we had to." The chamber erupted in confused voices. Representatives demanded explanations. How could an entire species hide between galaxies? Why would they leave without warning? Raised one hand, and the room fell quiet again. There was something about her presence that commanded respect, even from species that didn't usually take orders from others. 15 years ago, we detected something approaching from beyond the galactic rim, she explained. An ancient enemy that consumes entire star systems. We had perhaps 3 months before they reached inhabited space. She paused and looked around the chamber. We faced a choice. We could warn you and watch as political divisions delayed any meaningful response, or we could take drastic action to prepare. What kind of action? Someone called out. We opened artificial wormholes and evacuated our entire population to the deep dark, said simply. 12 billion people, every ship, every piece of technology. We sacrificed our place in this galaxy to learn how to defend it. The chamber was silent except for the hum of life support systems. The implications of what she was saying slowly sank in. Doctor stood up slowly. You left to save us. His expression softened when she looked at the elderly human. We left to save everyone, Doctor, including ourselves, but we always planned to return. What did you learn out there? Ra asked. Smiled, but it wasn't entirely reassuring. We learned how to fight monsters. The emergency council session continued for hours. Admiral's holographic image stood calmly in the center of the chamber, while hundreds of alien representatives shouted questions at her. You're saying you detected an invasion 15 years ago, demanded General of the Hegemony. His metal-plated face showed deep skepticism. Our sensors would have detected any threat. Shook her head. Your sensors are designed to detect conventional threats, ships, energy weapons, nuclear devices. These enemies are different. They exist partially outside normal space. Doctor leaned forward in her seat. What are they exactly? We call them devourers, replied. They're not truly alive, but they're not simple machines either. They consume matter and energy from entire star systems. Everything they take is processed for purposes we don't fully understand. She gestured, and a new holographic display appeared. It showed images that made several delegates gasp in horror. Massive mechanical constructs the size of moons drifted through space. Behind them, star systems were dark and empty. They've destroyed hundreds of galaxies, continued. The deep dark is full of refugees from worlds they've consumed. That's how we learn to fight them. Ra studied the images carefully. How do you know all this? How could humans learn so much in just 15 years? Time moves differently in the deep dark, explained. 15 years here felt like 50 years to us. We had time to learn, time to adapt, time to become something new. The chamber fell quiet as delegates tried to understand what that meant. Continued her explanation. When we first arrived in the deep dark, we were just refugees like everyone else. Our ships were damaged from forcing the wormhole passages. Many of our people were sick from exposure to exotic radiation. She paused, remembering those difficult early days. But we met others who had escaped the devourers, species from distant galaxies who had been fighting this war for thousands of years. They taught us things our science never imagined. Doctor felt tears on her cheeks. Her people had suffered so much, and she hadn't even known they were alive. The first thing we learned was that conventional weapons don't work, said. The devourers exist in multiple dimensions at once. You can destroy their physical forms, but their consciousness just moves to a backup body. General growled in frustration. Then how do you fight them? You have to attack their pattern coherence, explained. They're quantum consciousness parasites wearing mechanical shells. You need weapons that can disrupt their existence across multiple dimensions. She gestured again, and the holographic display changed. Now it showed human ships that looked nothing like the vessels they had used before the disappearance. These ships seemed to bend light around themselves. Parts of them appeared to exist in different places at the same time. We learned to build quantum phase weapons, continued. Energy devices that can target consciousness itself, but using them changes you. Every time we fight the devourers, we become a little less human and a little more something else. The implications of that statement sent worried murmurs through the chamber. What kind of changes? Doctor asked quietly. Looked directly at her. Enhanced radiation resistance, improved neural processing speed, the ability to interface directly with quantum-scale technology, and other things that are harder to explain. She held up her hand. For just a moment it seemed to shimmer and become transparent. Then it returned to normal. Some of our people have gone further, admitted. They've transcended physical existence entirely. They exist now as pure consciousness, fighting battles in dimensions we can't perceive. The chamber was silent, except for the sound of breathing and mechanical life support systems. The changes aren't just physical, continued. We think differently now. We see connections that weren't visible before. We understand that individual survival means nothing if the entire galaxy dies. Ra stood up slowly. You're telling us that the Hegemony War happened because of these devourers? Nodded grimly. They always begin with infiltration. They send advanced agents to create conflict and division. While you're fighting each other, they establish processing stations at the galactic rim. By the time you notice the real threat, it's too late. General slammed his fist on his chair. Impossible. The Hegemony War started over trade disputes. Did it? Asked. Or did those disputes suddenly become more intense after humanity disappeared? Did your intelligence services notice unusual communications from unknown sources? Did your leaders suddenly become more aggressive and less willing to compromise? The general's face went pale behind his metal plating. Those things had happened exactly as described. The good news is that you haven't lost yet, said. We returned because there's still time to save the galaxy. The devourers are already here, but they're still in the infiltration phase. She looked around the chamber at the hundreds of different species. The bad news is that stopping them will require something this galaxy has never achieved: complete unity, every species working together with no exceptions. Doctor stood up. "What do you need from us?" Smiled at her. It was the first time her expression had shown real warmth. "We need you to trust us. We need you to follow human military leadership. And we need you to be willing to change just as we've changed." "Change how?" Ra asked. "The old ways of thinking won't work against this enemy," explained. "Territorial disputes, racial prejudices, religious differences, all of that has to be set aside. You have to think of yourselves not as separate species, but as one galactic civilization." She gestured toward the display showing her fleet. "The ships you see are just the advance guard. In the deep dark, we have mobile cities housing millions of humans. We have manufacturing facilities that can build weapons you've never imagined. We have allies from other galaxies ready to help." The chamber buzzed with excited conversations as delegates realized what was offering. "But," continued, and her voice cut through the noise, "none of that will matter if you can't work together. The Devourers have destroyed thousands of galaxies. They've never been stopped by divided civilizations." Doctor looked around at the assembled delegates. Representatives from species that had been enemies just hours ago were already talking to each other about cooperation. "How long do we have?" she asked. His expression became grim again. "Our deep space monitors detected the first Devourer scout ships crossing the galactic boundary 3 days ago. If they follow their usual pattern, we have perhaps 6 months before the main invasion begins." The chamber erupted in panicked voices. 6 months to unite hundreds of different species and prepare for a war unlike anything they had ever imagined. Raised her hand for silence. "6 months is enough if you're willing to do what's necessary, but we need to start now." 3 weeks after the Council emergency session, the first Devourer attacks began exactly as Admiral had predicted. Long-range sensors at the galactic rim went silent one by one. When scout ships were sent to investigate, they found empty space where star systems had been just days before. Captain Torres stood on the bridge of the human ship Prometheus, watching his mixed crew prepare for humanity's first joint operation with galactic forces. Half his officers were human. The other half came from a dozen different species who had volunteered to serve under human command. "Sensor contact," announced Lieutenant, a crystalline whose body looked like living gemstone. 3 Devourer scout vessels approaching the outpost. Torres nodded calmly. This would be the first real test of human tactics against the Devourer threat. The outpost was home to 50,000 people from various species. If they couldn't save it, the galaxy would lose faith in human leadership. "All stations battle ready," Torres ordered. "Remember, these aren't normal enemies. Don't trust your regular sensors. Watch for dimensional phase shifts." Doctor was aboard the Prometheus as an observer. At 127 years old, she had insisted on seeing the first battle despite Admiral's concerns for her safety. She needed to understand what her people had become. She watched the crew work with fluid efficiency. The human officers moved with enhanced reflexes, their hands dancing over controls that responded to thought as much as touch. The alien crew members had been given basic neural interfaces that let them keep up with human reaction times. "Enemy vessels are phasing in and out of normal space," reported Ensign, a young. "I can't get a targeting lock." Torres smiled grimly. "That's why we're here, watch and learn." He placed his hand on a control panel that seemed to flow like liquid. Quantum phase scanners online, pattern recognition active. The main screen changed to show something that made Doctor gasp. The Devourer ships weren't just metal constructs. They were surrounded by writhing clouds of energy that existed in multiple dimensions at once. Parts of them flickered in and out of visible reality. "There," Torres pointed at patterns in the energy clouds. "Those are their consciousness anchors. Target those points with quantum disruption pulses. The Prometheus began to change as it entered combat mode. Its hull seemed to shimmer and become partially transparent. Weapon ports opened that hadn't been visible before. Energy began building around the ship in patterns that hurt to look at directly. "Firing quantum phase torpedoes," announced the weapons officer. Doctor expected to see bright energy beams like in the old wars. Instead, ripples passed through space itself. Where they touched the Devourer ships, reality seemed to twist and bend. One of the enemy vessels simply ceased to exist. Not destroyed or exploded, it was just gone as if it had never been there. "Direct hit on the consciousness matrix," Tors reported. "One target eliminated." The remaining Devourer ships began moving in ways that physics. They folded space around themselves, appearing in multiple locations at once. Energy beams lashed out that seemed to drain light from the surrounding space. "Shields holding," reported the engineering officer, "but they're trying to phase-lock our quantum field." Tors activated ship-wide communications. "All hands prepare for dimensional shift. We're going into phase space." Doctor felt her stomach drop as reality twisted around the ship. She could see the normal universe fading into gray shadows. They were now fighting in a realm that existed between dimensions. "Much better," Tors said with satisfaction. "Now we can see them properly." In phase space, the Devourer ships appeared as they truly were massive mechanical parasites wrapped around cores of alien consciousness. They looked like metal spiders the size of cities, with tendrils that reached into dimensions Doctor couldn't even perceive. "Target the central consciousness nodes," Tors ordered. "Full quantum burst." The Prometheus unleashed weapons that had no names in any galactic language. Energy that existed as pure information struck the Devourers at the level of consciousness itself. The alien machines writhed and convulsed as their parasitic minds were disrupted. But the battle came at a cost. Doctor watched in horror as several human crew members began to glow with inner light. Their bodies became translucent as they pushed their enhanced abilities too far. "Captain," one of them called out, his voice echoing strangely, "I'm losing cohesion. The quantum field is pulling me in." Tors nodded sadly. "Understood, Petty Officer Williams. Thank you for your service." Williams smiled as his body faded away completely. "See you in the deep dark, sir." 3 more crew members transcended during the battle, their consciousness ascending to higher dimensions where they could continue fighting on levels Doctor couldn't understand. When the last Devourer ship was destroyed, the Prometheus returned to normal space. The outpost was saved, but the victory felt hollow to Doctor. Her people were winning by sacrificing their humanity. "Is that what always happens?" she asked Tors after the battle. The captain looked older than he had before the fight. "Sometimes, using quantum weapons changes us. Every battle we become a little less physical and a little more pure consciousness. Eventually, we transcend completely." "Is that a good thing or a bad thing?" Tors was quiet for a long moment. "I don't know anymore. The ones who transcend say they're happier. They can perceive beauty and meaning we can't imagine, but they can never come back to physical existence." Doctor looked out at the stars. "We're not really the same species anymore, are we?" "No," Tors admitted, "but we're what humanity needed to become to save the galaxy." News of the victory at Outpost spread quickly through galactic communication networks. For the first time in recorded history, someone had successfully fought the Devourers and won. More species began volunteering to serve under human command. Admiral established joint training facilities where alien crews learned to use human technology. The process required neural modifications that changed how they thought and perceived reality. Some species adapted well. Others found the changes too extreme and from the program. But enough volunteers came forward to crew 50 mixed ships by the end of the first month. Each victory against Devourer scouts brought more converts to human tactical methods. Doctor spent her time documenting the changes happening to both humans and aliens. She realized she was witnessing the birth of something unprecedented, a truly unified galactic civilization arising from the pressure of existential threat. The final test came when deep space monitors detected massive energy signatures at the galactic core. The Devourers were building something enormous near the central black hole. "It's a galactic processing station," Admiral explained during the emergency briefing. "If they complete it, they can drain energy directly from the galaxy's heart. Everything will die." Doctor looked around the briefing room at representatives from hundreds of species. All of them were looking to Admiral for leadership. "How long do we have?" General asked. The former enemy of humanity now wore a human neural interface and served as tactical advisor. 6 weeks, replied. "Maybe 7 if we're lucky." The room fell silent. Everyone understood that this would be the final battle. Either they stopped the Devourers at the galactic core, or there wouldn't be a galaxy left to save. "Then we'd better get started," Doctor said quietly. Smiled at her. "We'd better indeed." The Unity Prime was the largest ship ever built in galactic history. It had taken 6 weeks to construct using technology from every major civilization. Human quantum engineering provided the framework. Crystalline computational systems controlled the weapons. Psychic amplifiers boosted communication. Even the former hegemony contributed their industrial knowledge. Admiral stood on the bridge looking at the massive fleet assembled around her flagship. Over 90,000 ships from hundreds of different species, all of them under unified human command for the first time in galactic history. Doctor sat in the observer's chair beside. At her age, this would likely be her last battle, but she couldn't miss seeing what humanity had accomplished. "Fleet status report," requested. "All ships ready for phase transition," reported Commander Vex, a hegemony officer whose body was now more machine than organic. "The neural link network is active across the entire fleet." Through the ship's quantum communication system, could sense the minds of every crew member in the fleet. Humans, crystallines, hegemony troops, and dozens of other species, all connected by the neural interfaces they had accepted. "Target analysis complete," announced the tactical officer. "The Devourer construction is 80% finished. We estimate 12 million hostile units defending the galactic core." Doctor shook her head. 12 million against 90,000. Those are terrible odds. Smiled confidently. "Numbers don't matter in quantum consciousness warfare. What matters is unity of purpose." They showed their destination, the galactic core, where a massive mechanical structure was being built around the central black hole. The Devourer construction looked like a metal web stretching across light years of space. Energy flowed through it in patterns that hurt to perceive directly. "If they finish that," explained, "they can drain power directly from the black hole's rotation. They'll have unlimited energy to process the entire galaxy." She activated ship-wide communications. "All hands, this is Admiral. Today we face the greatest threat our galaxy has ever known, but we do not face it alone. We face it as one people, united across all species." Her voice carried to every ship in the fleet. Humans and aliens listened together to her words. The Devourers have destroyed thousands of galaxies because they face divided civilizations. Today, they face something they have never encountered, a truly unified galactic consciousness. Doctor felt tears on her cheeks. This was what humanity had become, not conquerors but unifiers, not destroyers but teachers of cooperation. "Fleet prepare for final approach," ordered. The unified fleet began its assault on the galactic core. As they approached, reality itself seemed to fight against them. The massive gravitational forces from the black hole twisted space and time. The Devourer machines generated fields that made normal physics meaningless. Devourer fleet incoming, reported sensors. Estimate 5 million combat units. The enemy ships looked like metal nightmares. They moved in ways that should have been impossible, folding space around themselves and attacking from multiple dimensions at once. All ships enter phase space, commanded. The entire fleet shifted into the realm between dimensions. Doctor gasped as reality became fluid around them. She could see the true form of the Devourer construction, not just a machine, but a vast parasitic consciousness trying to attach itself to the galaxy's life force. The battle that followed was unlike anything in galactic history. Ships fought across multiple dimensions at once. Weapons that targeted consciousness itself filled space with energies that existed more as thought than matter. Human crews began transcending rapidly as they pushed their quantum abilities beyond physical limits. Doctor watched dozens of her people fade into pure consciousness, ascending to fight battles in dimensions she couldn't perceive. But the alien crews were transcending too. The neural interfaces they had accepted were changing them just as they had changed humans. Crystalline beings became living networks of pure information, expanded their psychic abilities beyond anything their species had achieved before. "We're losing too many people to transcendence," Doctor worried. Nodded grimly. "That's the price of fighting this kind of war, but look at what we're becoming." Through the quantum link, Doctor could sense the growing unity of the fleet. Individual minds were beginning to merge into something larger. The barriers between species were dissolving as consciousness itself became the battlefield. "Admiral," the tactical officer called out, "the Devourer construction is at 95% completion. We need to stop them now." Closed her eyes and reached out through the neural network. "All ships, all crews, all consciousness unite with me. We need to become one mind with one purpose." What happened next? Every law of physics and psychology that galactic science understood. 90,000 ships full of thinking beings from hundreds of different species became a single unified consciousness. Doctor felt her individual self dissolving into something infinitely larger. She was still herself, but she was also every other person in the fleet. She could think with the logic of crystalline minds and feel with the emotions of hearts. She could see through human eyes enhanced by deep, dark knowledge. The unified consciousness that emerged from this merger was something new in galactic history. It was not one species or another, but all species becoming something greater than any of them could achieve alone. This galactic mind reached out across space and time to touch the Devourer construction. For the first time in millions of years of conquest, the parasitic machines encountered something they couldn't understand: a consciousness that existed not to consume, but to create and protect. The psychic wave that erupted from the unified fleet didn't destroy the Devourers. Instead, it transformed them. The alien machines suddenly experienced what they had been trying to consume: life, hope, love, creativity, sacrifice for others. Across the galaxy, Devourer fleets simply stopped fighting. Their mechanical bodies shut down as their parasitic consciousness was overwhelmed by emotions they had never felt before. The great construction around the black hole collapsed not from weapons, but from the machines voluntarily dismantling it. For the first time in their existence, the Devourers understood what they had been destroying. In the aftermath, the unified consciousness began to separate back into individuals, but the connections remained. Every being in the fleet could still sense the others. They were separate people again, but they would never truly be alone. Doctor found herself back in her own body, but changed. She could feel the minds of humans and aliens alike as a warm presence in her thoughts. The loneliness that had haunted her for 15 years was gone forever. "What have we become?" she asked Admiral. Smiled as she looked around the bridge at her mixed crew. They were all different species, but they moved and worked together as if they shared one mind. "We've become what the galaxy always had the potential to be," replied. "One people sharing one home among the stars." Years later, children from dozens of worlds would learn about the day the galaxy became one. They would study how humanity returned from exile not to conquer, but to teach the greatest lesson of all, that survival required not just strength, but the wisdom to unite in the face of extinction. Doctor lived to see the establishment of the Galactic Unity Council, where representatives from every species worked together with an efficiency that would have been impossible before the war. She helped found schools where children of all species learned together, preparing for a future where the divisions between races would seem as ancient as the extinct devourers. Admiral's final words became the motto inscribed above the door of every Unity school. "We went into the dark as many. We returned to the light as one. And in between, we learned that home is not a place we defend, but a family we choose to save." The galaxy had found its family at last.